Hey there, and welcome back to Red Spark's Crypto Blog for your crypto and Cardano news. Now, I'm not going to spend too long on the charts today. I think we're all aware of the Evergrande news and how that's brought down the markets. But I guess just to point out that these losses that we're seeing, so negative 2.3% for Bitcoin, minus 5.2% for Cardano, by and large just wipes out the gains from the last day or two. So we're just back to where we were about 2 days ago. That's not to say it couldn't get worse. If you really think the Evergrande news could escalate and could bring the whole financial system to a grinding halt, then yeah, you might want to consider cashing out some of your positions now. I'm not a financial advisor and I have no idea what's going to happen. I just feel like I've lived through enough of these crises to keep holding on and see how it plays out. I'm much more interested in seeing the launch of all these dApps on Cardano and seeing the growth of these other cryptocurrencies that I'm invested in. For example, Coty, who've yet to announce their secret partnership with a major company, apparently. Some say it could be Facebook. I have no idea. But I'm quite excited and looking forward to hearing about that and see what that does to the Coty price. So yeah, so that's crypto for you. Lots of ups and downs all the time, and today is a bit of a down day. So the blog post that Tim Harrison promised yesterday was released. It's already causing a little bit of flutter on Twitter. Somebody wrote, let's go here. I like Cardano and I'm also developing for it, but this article is a bunch of hollow phrases with a passive aggressive touch. And Tim Harrison didn't like that. Hollow phrases with a passive aggressive touch. Right, lifting that and it's going straight on my LinkedIn profile. There was a few more sympathetic messages down here. Passive aggressive misses the mark. For me, it was more of talking about, making parameter changes. I think most folks, especially devs, already realize that. In my opinion, that guy's frustration was more rooted by fact than that nothing concrete in terms of specifics was mentioned. And then a little bit further down, please look how Shweta replied to the same dude, genuinely helpful. So the same person was clarifying. What I don't get is why the part of the building and serializing the transaction wasn't released together with Alonzo. My understanding is that the PAB does much more than this and that those additional features needed time. Your understanding is right. PAB is a sandbox environment where developers can try out dApp functionality in advance of any full live deployment on Cardano. Just to clarify that, so the PAB is more than what you would conventionally think of as a sandbox environment. Sandbox means completely disconnected from the live system. The PAB is a sandbox in the sense that it builds your transaction for you and tests it out that it's going to work, and then once it's happy with it, that's when you can then submit to the main network. So yeah, so it's a little bit more than just saying it's a sandbox environment, but yeah, it's a very important component. And this guy was asking why couldn't the building and building of that transaction be released at the same time that Alonzo was, and it's because there is a bit more to it than just simply building the transaction. It's doing a lot of checking that your transaction will work and go through and things like that. My high level thought reading through it yesterday, and we're going to go through it in depth on this video, was I didn't come away with any clarity on whether an Ethereum fee-based model would still be needed. And I've tweeted that as a question to Tim Harrison. I'll see if I get a response on that. But let's go through the paper in depth. Actually, before we begin, let's do a quick recap on terminology taken from my slide in one of my earlier videos. So up here we have the mempool. This is where the transactions first hang out when they're sent to the node, and it has a size of 128 kilobyte. Each transaction can be up to 16 kilobytes. Usually they're a lot smaller than that, but a Pluto script could be 16 kilobytes, and an NFT transaction could be a lot smaller. Transactions in the mempool are randomly selected by the node, and they go into a block. So this is a block here, the blue thing. And here you see every transaction has an equal size, but in reality they'll all have different sizes. The entire block itself can be up to 64 kilobytes, and it's allowed 1 second max for processing, although it usually just takes a few milliseconds. The transactions in this block are processed sequentially, although as Pi Lanningham explained in Hashoshi's video the other day, which I highly recommend watching, in the future we could execute these in parallel. So you can have a whole other batch of blocks down here, and they're also executed together at the same time, because in Cardano, each transaction is independent of the other transaction. So the first part of the blog just recaps over basic definitions, just like I did. So you see there the current block size is 64 kilobytes. Plutus script can be 16 kilobytes, although a simple transaction is a lot smaller. These measures have been balanced to ensure good network utilization while minimizing transaction latencies. If increased significantly and at once, users will face increased delay in block adoption time. That is because throughput and timeliness are in tension with each other. Maximizing throughput implies better network performance, but this can come at a cost of increased delay when the system is heavily saturated. And timeliness we'll come on to in the next section, but it talks about timeliness is the time it takes for something to propagate across the network and get processed, whereas throughput is how much transactions can be handled in 1 second. I thought this paragraph was rather honest. So up till now, it's always been like, oh yeah, we can play with the parameters, it'll all be easy, etc. But this paragraph was important in saying there's actual trade-offs that have to be made when you do that. So I did appreciate that honesty there. For timeliness, the total budget for block adoption is set to 5 seconds for a block to propagate across the network, 95% of the stake, with a budget of approximately 50 milliseconds available for Plutus scripts. This is designed to allow the block to include both scripts and simple transactions without monopolization. 5 seconds, I wasn't entirely clear. Am I reading this right? 5 seconds to propagate across the entire Cardano network? That would be amazing. When you think about it takes 3 days to settle international bank transfer, for something to propagate across the entire network in 5 seconds is mind-blowing. But I don't know if I've actually understood that right. Maybe it's something else, but otherwise, yeah, it's pretty impressive. So it goes on to talk about NFTs. So NFTs or NFT launches are a situation where you have several users or lots and lots of users trying to purchase the same NFT at the same time. This scenario created network scarcity for the NFT sale and therefore a huge demand on the service, 43,000% of the supply. So there is talking about a NFT drop that happened recently, which caused problems. And I generally agree with the tone of this article. I don't think that is something you can design the core blockchain to deal with. Or rather, if you were designing a blockchain that could handle outliers like that, then you probably haven't designed a very efficient blockchain. You probably got a lot of unused capacity lying around most days doing nothing. And that's going to be very costly and wasteful of energy. So I agree that in some ways it's not Cardano's problem. As it says down here, this is a growing market and NFT creators are already starting to iterate their processes to minimize the impact of such drops on the user experience. It's still early and we're all learning fast. It should be noted that the process of minting NFTs is perfectly parallelizable, meaning there is no limit to this process. Once minted, NFTs storing the programmable swap code and assets required to transact are ready to interact with the market. So that's probably more of a long-term solution when maybe I guess Hydra is in play. You can cater to everybody that wants an NFT by doing it in parallel. But in the short to mid-term, at least, there is a matter of building more efficient traffic systems rather than widening the roads. Some developers are already producing such systems specifically for NFT drops, which should reduce costs as well as short-term network loads. So yeah, I think dApp developers should be engineering their products to deal with this type of situation. It of course, it's going to happen if you're launching NFTs. You're going to get that very first launch that you do, that's where you're going to see the most demand. And so it's naive to say that, oh, it's not something I expected. It's the most critical part of launching any NFTs. Now, with DEXs, concurrency plays a more important role. Because the DApp design prerequisites that the whole state is kept within one UTXO rather than spread across multiple UTXOs, there occurs a dependency of a future transaction on an output from a previous transaction. So what that means is the idea of parallelizing transactions through something like Hydra, so stacking them on top of each other, that can't be applied for a DEX transaction. Or to be more clear, that can't be applied to DEX transactions where there is that dependency. A lot of transactions will still be able to be parallelized, as explained by Pi Lanningham from Sunday Swap in the Hashoshi video. It continues, this has been widely referred to as a concurrency issue. However, trundling out that automobile analogy again, it is no more of an issue than driving on the left is an issue in the UK or Japan. It does require a learning curve, but ultimately it is just a different way of doing things. And if a developer doesn't do it, yes, they will encounter problems. Blah, blah, blah. This might be what triggered that Twitter person, because that does have a slight passive-aggressive or condescending tone. Didn't really bother me too much. I'm much more interested in, well, what is the reality? So let's move down to that. Cardano's E-Utxo model is different from the account-based model. dApps built on Cardano should move away from the single-threaded state machine style and go down a level of abstraction to the E-Utxo directly, constructing a solution that involves concurrent edges in the E-Utxo graph. It is important to use different sets of UTXOs, therefore enforcing parallelism, which will improve the throughput of the system while keeping the performance of individual operations the same. A lot of technical jargon there. I have a gist of what they're talking about. I know what a concurrent edge on a graph is, and I know what a UTXO is. But let's couple that with the bit further down in highlighted in yellow. For more details, read the concurrency blog post and how to build a scalable Plutus dApp. And we will publish further content on this in due course. So that's kind of my takeaway, was that, okay, it sounds like the dApp developers have to implement a bit of a complicated solution on their end to make sure they structure things correctly. I'm not saying that it's wrong to expect them to do that. In fact, it's probably completely okay and correct to do for them to do that. But I don't think we should simply throw them in the deep end and say, okay, you either sink or swim. So that's why that last paragraph about offering a blog post and how to build a scalable Plutus app is important. I haven't yet read those to see what the quality is like, but hopefully they are helpful to developers, and the fact that they're going to publish more content. So I think that will be my key message there is, yep, great, let's tell the dApp developers to make sure they build things properly, but let's not throw them in the deep end. Let's try and give them the support they need so they understand, because it does require more thought than Ethereum. It is more complicated developing on Cardano than Ethereum. Let's not beat around the bush on that. Sure, this does require a shift in mindset, but the UTXO model is more secure. So yeah, I agree with that's all good, but let's give them the support. Okay, the optimization roadmap. So here they talk about the different options available to them in the near term and the implications. So increasing the block size, the downside is the trade-off that I mentioned earlier. Larger blocks take longer to propagate across the network. This also means that nodes will need more time to verify transactions. To ensure that the increase does not compromise block adoption time, we will gradually change parameters and assess the results during high saturation periods. This is not a one-step update, but rather an iterative approach that will provide us with clear results and help ensure the most efficient adjustments. So to me, this sounds like, hey, we said we can increase block sizes earlier. Well, there is a trade-off, and we're still figuring out how far we can push it. And we're going to be doing this iteratively. Completely fine about the iterative thing, completely fine that they want to sort of test things out. It's just a slightly different tone to what we would have heard of a month or two ago. And I definitely prefer this much more honest tone. It's much more refreshing. mempool size, that little lounge area where all the transactions hang out, currently set to 128 kilobytes. However, mempool size increase won't improve network throughput. Transactions queues will stay the same. The mempool allows for a fair adoption of new transactions that enter it randomly based on the producing node that is chosen by the lottery algorithm. Long story short, it's not going to help speed things up. It just means you'll have less people having to retry their transactions at busy times. Script compression. This is a fairly obvious one. They can essentially zip up the transactions before it goes onto the block to make them a lot smaller. Developers will be able to submit more sophisticated code, compressing it to 16 kilobytes or less, and there will be more space left for other transactions. And that's because as the dApp developers were developing Pluto scripts, they found they were hitting the 16 kilobyte limit quite easily for more complicated transactions, such as dexes, essentially. So that probably gave the dApp developers a lot of headache in past months. I'm not sure how they engineered scripts around that, but certainly the ability to have larger Pluto scripts would be of value to a lot of dApp developers. So that was really about it. Here they defend the choice of E-Utxo. Fine, all good. And then down here is a bit of a recap. In the short term, there's going to be that iteration and improvement and tweaking of the parameters to see what works and how far they can push it. They plan to move the ledger state from memory to disk storage to ease the on-chain load alongside script compression. So that should certainly help. And then in the midterm, so I think version 1 of Hydra is out in Q1 next year. And then who knows when the final version of Hydra will be. But Hydra is a midterm solution. And then longer term, our chief scientist and team continue to research other methods and mechanisms. Ding ding ZK rollups. That's what, from my research and what Sebastian and others have been saying, that might have to be the longer term solution. So it'd be good to hear more about ZK rollups from IOHK. But going back to this part here, the iteration, the short term, I came away none the wiser as to, are we going to have to contemplate a Ethereum fee-based model in the near term or not? That still wasn't very clear to me. I mean, I guess the answer is nobody knows yet. We need to make these parameter changes and see how well the platform is coping with the expected demand, and only then might we have to consider Ethereum gas-based fees. But it would be good if we could just hear IOHK at least address that and ZK rollups. So that's it from me for today. If you like that, please give me a thumbs up, and if you're not a subscriber, then please consider subscribing and follow me along on Twitter. Other than that, I hope you all have a great day.